What is up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos. This time for Wednesday, October 20th. It is one of our larger slates. We had a two-game slate tonight, I guess last night by the time you're watching this. These are recorded the night before. But we have a much larger 11-game slate, which finally we will have to make some decisions instead of James Harden being owned over 60% and everyone knowing exactly where they're going to go regardless. But I am your host, Bales, joined by, for the first time, Spike. He is our newest NBA DFS analyst. He's doing core plays. He will have articles at times as well. But for now, he's on the podcast. Spike, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for asking. It feels great to be here. It feels great for basketball to be back, and I'm excited to dive into the slate.
If you guys didn't know, Spike started as a subscriber, has just absolutely dominated, been asking questions of all kinds, honing his craft in terms of DFS, and has looked fantastic recently. He has now joined the team, helping out other people. So you might want to jump in the chat, kind of subscribe to our core plays, do all that good stuff, and maybe you're the next one to join the team. But before we get started, I do want to say you can find all of our free content at dfskarma.com. We have free articles every day. We also now have premium articles, which will be written by Ben. His first one will come out tomorrow. It is a core plays article. On top of that, we do have our actual core plays, which you can purchase a package by going to the website, dfskarma.com, and clicking the pricing tab where everything will pop up that you could possibly need. Again, all of this will be in the description below. If you enjoy our content, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications by clicking the little bell. Ben will be doing live streams, so it's much more important now for the NBA season that you turn on the little bell. They will be about an hour before lock or so, in that range. But click the bell, turn on the notifications. It'll send you a message when he goes live. Plus, you'll get whenever these are uploaded and everything like that. Go ahead and leave us a comment. Let us know how we did. I'm sure Spike is dying to know how you felt his first podcast went. Ask any questions. We'll be here to answer them throughout the day, or just leave literally any comments that you want, whether we did great, what you didn't like, anything of the sort. Go ahead and do that. As always, the more engagement you give me, the more likely I am to be able to convince Travis and Anthony to let me give away free stuff on this stream. So the thumbs up, the subscribes, the comments, all that good stuff will result in potentially weekly or monthly NBA DFS core plays packages for free for you guys. So I feel like that's a win-win in this situation. A lot of talking going on, about to be a little bit more, because we kind of start the NBA DFS podcast off with injuries, and there is a lot to go over on an 11-game slate. Hopefully I don't miss anything. If I do, drop it in the comments. We can discuss there, or also get in our Discord. It's 100% for free. You can do that in the description below, or dfskarma.com. Once again, click on chat room. That is 100% free. Or if you get a core plays package, you can jump in the premium channels as well, which is where we do a lot of our discussing. In terms of injuries on this 11-game slate, Caris LeVert is going to be out for a bit of time, but it's important to note that he is out tonight. Keelan Martin also out for Indiana, while Jeremy Lamb and Justin Holiday are questionable. You have Troy Brown Jr., questionable for Chicago. Isaiah Livers and Cade Cunningham both out for Detroit. Those are obviously, more of their top draft pick type players. Moving on, Cassius Winston, Rui Hachimura, and Yuta Watanabe all out in the Washington-Toronto game. You have Chris Boucher, who is questionable for Toronto. Al Horford out for Boston. You have Jaylen Brown questionable for Boston. Nerlens Noel is doubtful for the New York Knicks, while Mitchell Robinson has been announced that he will play. In Cleveland, Dylan Windler out. Dean Wayne doubtful. Houston, Garrison Matthews out. You have Daniel House is questionable in that game. On the other side, for Minnesota, you have Patrick Beverley, who is obviously suspended for one game, and then you have Jalen Noel and Jordan McLaughlin, who are both questionable. In Philly, along with just a ridiculous amount of drama carried to his name, we have Ben Simmons, who has officially been suspended for this first game, and Shake Milton is out. Matisse Thybulle is in. Moving on to Orlando, Chuma Okeke and Etuan Moore both out. For San Antonio, Jock Landale's questionable while Devontae Kakak is out. In Utah, Trent Forrest out. That is basically the only injury news that we kind of have at the moment in that game. And then Tony Snell is also out for Portland later in the night. I think I hit most people that are at least relatively people may think may play, I guess is the best way to put it. There's obviously other guys like Klay Thompson. I didn't say on the last pod, I don't believe. It was very clear that he's out. Obviously, he's not playing. But I think that about does it. And we can move on to players that were actually interested in playing. Once again, this comes out the night before, so it is very important to get into our Discord where we're talking about stuff all throughout the day. NBA news changes. A lot of news changes very fast. So I highly recommend getting in our Discord where, you can kind of feel free to ask questions, all that kind of stuff. And we'll really discuss everything that's happening throughout the day. But starting at point guard, we'll go position by position here. I guess more towards the top. If you're spending up, Spike, who are you looking at here?
If I'm spending up, I really like De'Aaron Fox. He's got a great matchup against Portland. Just they give up a lot of points to the point guard. He averages over 20 fantasy points a game. What's really not to like about him. Also like DeJounte Murray as well. He also has a great matchup, and he's nowhere near as expensive as De'Aaron Fox. He's only $6,800 on DraftKings. That's something I kind of like. It's not a huge salary relief, but compared to the $9,300 for De'Aaron Fox, you kind of got to like those savings, and you'll definitely be able to use them elsewhere. KPJ is someone else that looks really nice as well. Also only 7,800. Those are my three top plays. And then I can kind of point out the obvious one here with Ben Simmons out. Tyrese Maxey looks great, almost minimum at 4,000. So I'm definitely putting him in my lineup somewhere.
Yeah, it's so tough with someone like Maxey. Like, very obviously, that's the most. He's very clearly a great option. So I feel like Maxey's kind of the clear-cut point guard that you're using tonight. If you go up to the top, which I do believe, obviously, with value like Maxey on the slate, I do believe that you made a very good call with De'Aaron Fox there. I also like the other side of that game with Damian Lillard. I'm not scared off by Sacramento whatsoever. So I do believe that game has the highest game total. I think it's slightly over 230 points. So either side of that, when you look at 2-star point guards, 100% fine either way. I think I probably slightly prefer Dame just because we know that he has like true capabilities to fully take over a game. I believe last season he came close to scoring 100 in a game. So really just the ridiculous ceiling in that type of a situation. But De'Aaron Fox, a little bit of salary relief, and we could see him continue to kind of build up as a young player in the NBA, and this could be the season that he really takes off. We kind of watched it before with players like Donovan Mitchell. So I do think that's an interesting spot for sure. I 100% agree with Kevin Porter Jr. He really blossomed last year for Houston. I know a lot of people, the same way that plenty of people, I guess, have Jordan Poole as their most improved player. A lot of people are also taking Kevin Porter Jr. as that type of an option. So I do think that makes a lot of sense. Other guys that I feel like I'm slightly interested in, but I don't 100% know what exactly I want to do with them, are like Tyrese Halliburton. I feel like he comes with so much upside. It's just I'm not 100% certain on his role at this point. So at 7,000, you're not getting too much of salary relief. And then I know that he's mainly a shooting guard, but he's also point guard eligible on DraftKings, which is what we talk about here. CJ McCollum, only 7,200. He's a way to get a piece of that game where you're getting a ton of upside, I guess, just pure upside, and you don't have to pay Dame's price tag. So how do you feel about Halliburton or McCollum? I know, obviously, you like Murray slightly more. Obviously, I feel like that's a very good play as well. But in terms of McCollum and Halliburton, do you have any interest in either of those two?
I definitely have interest in CJ for sure. It's kind of why I want to kind of stray away from Dame right there, is because I kind of think they're gonna feed into each other a little bit. But they both have really good matchups, and definitely someone I was looking at. I was going to bring him up at the shooting guard position as well. Halliburton, I'm kind of going to wait a game and see what his role is now, and kind of go from there, because I played him a couple times in preseason, and yeah, it's preseason, but the last couple of games, he's didn't look like the same guy, but time will tell on that. But I'm just going to wait and see.
Yeah, I think that's completely fine. One other thing that I do want to point out that I feel like is really nice for his fantasy value, but I don't necessarily know if this is the spot that I'm playing. RJ Barrett now has point guard eligibility. He's point guard small forward on DraftKings, and he's under 6,000. So not necessarily the pure matchup that I 100% want. I'm not really going to shy away from it either at that point, though. And we do know that RJ Barrett comes with a ton of upside, and I would expect him to continue to get better that young in his career. There are two other quick spots at point guard that I want to ask you about before we move on. And it's more or less just the type of, what's the best way to put it, I guess? Who do you think is going to be more or less the star for the show or run the offense? First, you have Detroit, Cade Cunningham out. So obviously we're going to get, I would assume, Killian Hayes running point. But there's also Corey Joseph that you kind of have to deal with. Frank Jackson's there as well. I don't think to as big of an extent. And then Saban Lee. Do you think they're kind of early in the season with Cade Cunningham not playing? Do you think Killian Hayes takes the next step forward, or are you just like not looking to play him at all? Because he does come with a very low price tag.
It's tough, there's for him there. Corey Joseph was kind of pretty hot for the Kings before he got traded last year, and he came to Detroit and he didn't really let up much. But again, it's a crowded field. So I mean, I'd maybe take a shot on Hayes or Joseph in a tournament, but obviously not in cash. But I'm probably not going there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's completely fine and reasonable. I do think the Hayes is a good tournament option personally. Another tournament option that I didn't mention that's very cheap, Spencer Dinwiddie, obviously now starting for Washington. I want to see if they put any type of minutes restriction. I know he played 26 in their tune-up game, so I feel relatively comfortable that he's going to be in the high 20s now that it's actually the regular season and not preseason. So Dinwiddie, I believe he's 4,900, is a bit too cheap. But the other, I guess, rotation that I wanted to ask you about, because I'm actually pretty shocked at the price tags at this point. So Fred VanVleet has point guard eligibility. He probably handles the ball quite a bit, but is more or less going to play shooting guard. Malachi Flynn is 1,000 more than Goran Dragic. Which one of those two do you lean towards? Because Flynn can get, if you watched him in college, Flynn can get hot quick. But Dragic's just been consistently good throughout his career, and he's been who I believe is one of the more underrated players in the NBA. So how do you feel about those two, I guess, is the best way to put it.
So I guess this is a great time to say it. I am a pretty big Raptors fan, so you picked a great thing to talk about. I like Flynn a lot. I also like Dragic a lot, and I think Dragic coming here, he probably has something to prove. He probably sees Flynn as his teammate, but he's probably trying to get more minutes and outplay him. And for $1,000 less, with how many fantasy points he was averaging a game last year, I'd rather take my shot there. I think it's a better play. I think Flynn will obviously be less owned. I mean, they're all going to be low owned, but I like Dragic more there.
Yeah, I think that I feel the same way. It's tough to play Flynn or pay 6,000 for Flynn when you can get Dragic for 5K, right?
Yeah.
But moving on to shooting guard, Who are some of your top options at this position?
Top options at this, I like Donovan Mitchell here. Really good spot for him. Never mind, not only, but 9,600. So I mean, you're definitely paying for it, but he could easily match that tag, I think. I also like Anthony Edwards a lot. I think he's going to have a great matchup. He's only 7,100, so I feel like that's a little cheap for him. But that's just me. Obviously, you can go with Beal. I have no problems with that. He's a great play. I think he's almost matchup proof at this point. Then you were just talking about Van Vliet. I have no issues with him either at 7,500. I feel like that's a little cheap, considering he has the upside to drop 50 or 60 points any game. But as far as the top is concerned, that's pretty much where I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think you outlined that pretty well. Donovan Mitchell, great play. 9,600 is a lot, but at the same time, DraftKings is kind of pricing their top tier players a bit too cheap at the moment. We saw it last night on the Tuesday slate where you had, Harden obviously grossly underpriced. Russell Westbrook at like 8,600. I know you have the weird thing with the new offense and everything, but just grossly mispriced. You essentially nailed it for Van Vliet. We talked about CJ McCollum at point guard, Andrew Edwards. They're all plays that I'm also interested in. The only other guy at the top that I guess I would add, 8,600 is a bit too cheap for Zach LaVine. That is an odd price, especially with him, kind of making noise in Chicago about being the top dog and everything. So I do think that that's a little weird that they have him so cheap compared to everyone else. When you move down to the mid tier, there's so many interesting things at this point. Like, you have Kyrie Thomas at 6,000. That's just not something that you really would expect to say for opening night, I guess, when there's 11 games. Evan Fournier at 6,000 as well. He comes with plenty of upside, but there's not necessarily a ton that I love in the mid tier. I think if you want to go someone like Malik Beasley for his upside, you're fine with that, but you're kind of in an odd spot. I guess like Joe Ingles, it's a plus matchup. I don't necessarily love that. If you want to take the shot on Seth Curry and you believe that he kind of runs more point guard with Maxey as more or less the only other guy that they're really going to use too much of, I think you can take your shot there. But is there anyone kind of in this mid tier, or I guess if there's not anyone in the mid tier that you like, is there anyone priced down that you're interested in as well? So mid tier or cheap options. Is there anyone that you're really looking at?
I'm glad you said Beasley because I'm kind of looking at him too, but that's kind of gonna have to wait on a little bit of news because you got Noel and McLaughlin who are both questionable right now. So I feel like if both of them were to lean on the side of out, he could play a little bit more minutes and maybe take on some of that point guard role because they really aren't too deep at point guard after that. So he was definitely someone I was looking at. Curry as well. You already nailed it. Strictly because of Simmons being out. If he wasn't, I wouldn't even be thinking about it. But the other one I'm interested in, if you want to go way down, is probably Melton. He's someone that kind of piqued my eye for a cheap price. I know they got some injuries over there in Memphis, and for that price tag, he doesn't need a lot to pay it off. You got Dylan Brooks is out, and that's I feel like Melton's was going to get minutes anyways. So you get Brooks out, you might as well add another 5 or 10 to it, which he has a lot of upside. I mean his floor is low too, so just be aware of that. This is strictly for tournaments, but other than that, there's no one else down there that really interests me. This is a position you pay up for today, I think.
Yeah, I think Melton's really interesting. I mean, Brooks being out, not only you would assume bumps his minutes up a little bit, but it also would bump up his usage, which is, relatively high. It's not as high as you would assume based on what he does on the court, but it is relatively high. And with Brooks out, he could take on a larger role. The guy that catches my eye for cheap at 4,200 is Jalen Green. He was the number 2 overall pick. He played well in the preseason. Nothing, that, especially in the last game, I guess, nothing that you're going to write home about or anything, but the volume should be there. I would assume that he gets plenty of minutes. I believe he played 32 minutes in his last game, which they kind of treated as a dress rehearsal. Kevin Porter Jr. played 33 in that game. I think Christian Wood played over 30 as well. So you would assume that Jalen Green is essentially just going to be gifted all of the minutes that he could possibly handle for a rebuilding team. At 4,100, the number 2 overall pick prior to the season, a lot of people thought he was going to go number 1, and then Cade Cunningham continued to play extremely well. And even some people had bets on Jalen Green going first overall at that point anyway. So 4,200 feels like a very bad misprice for me. Moving to small forward, oddly enough, there's no one at the top like there is point guard, shooting, any other position, I guess you could say. There's no one over, I think 8,100 is Jaylen Brown, who's questionable. So that's something that you really do need to keep an eye on. But if you're paying, I don't even want to say at the top of small forward, because it's really not at the top. It's kind of in the mid tier, because even Jaylen Brown isn't overly expensive. So I guess if you're sticking in the mid tier to mid to high, who are you looking at here?
Anthony Edwards is also shooting or small forward eligible too. So I really like him here. If you really like someone else at shooting guard, someone else up there that interests me is DeMar DeRozan. He's got a really good matchup against Detroit, just like Murray does, and I feel like his upside is up there, 7,100, maybe a little cheap for him. Other than that, I mean, really up there. When I say up there in the 7,000s, there's really not a whole lot I like. Someone that really catches my eye in that kind of mid tier to low tier is also same team now, Doug McDermott, 4,700. I loved what he was doing in Indiana. I think his upside is really high. And also someone else I really am interested in, and this is depending on Lamb news, is Chris Duarte, 3,300. Can't really beat that tag. And if Lamb is out, they already have some other injuries there too. He could be seeing a lot of minutes, and could possibly get some high usage in there too.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I think Duarte is only shooting guard eligible on DraftKings, but the entire thing just remains that's a really good play, especially assuming Lamb's out. At the top of the, what was that?
Yeah, you're right there. He's only shooting guard, but
a little odd for them to do that, but it kind of is what it is. There's going to be some weird position meltdowns early in the season on FanDuel and DraftKings, but at the position, I think you outlined it really well. I would probably add Harrison Barnes, just because they told Marvin Bagley that they're not planning on having him in the rotation. If that's the case, Barnes could see minutes in the high 30s or even hit potentially 40. I don't see him getting to 40 this early in the season, but 36 to 38, I don't think is out of the question. I think that's strictly a tournament option. I probably don't play him in cash at the price, just because obviously it still is Harrison Barnes. Other guys that really stick out to me, probably my favorite play, 6,100, OG Anunoby. Way too cheap. He took on a much bigger role in the offseason. I expect him to take a massive step forward. I really liked him coming out of college. I felt like he's had good performances, and I feel like this is the season where he takes it to the next level. So I'm probably going to be attacking him really early, a lot, and he gets a plus matchup against Washington. So I do really like him. For 6,400, You have Sadiq Bey. I expect him to continue to get better as well, coming off of a fantastic rookie season. So I think that Bey makes a lot of sense, even against Chicago. Obviously, you have, RJ Barrett at this point. We kind of already talked about him. That's really where I kind of want to sit, especially there's just no one that really sticks out at the moment. You have like Patrick Williams is a bit too cheap at 4,200. I have no problems with that. Now in Cleveland, Larry Markkinen is only 4,100. It's just kind of risky at this point. So those are the types of plays that I'm looking at for small forward. I feel like OG Anunoby is just going to be my top option, and I'm not sure that anyone's gonna be able to talk me off of playing him at this position at this point.
Yeah, no, he's a monster, man. Another one of my Toronto guys, and I think with Siakam out as well, he could see a little uptick in usage as well. But we saw it a couple times last year, even with him in. He kind of just stole the game and stole the show, and I think he had a couple of games where he just dropped to like 50, almost 60 points. So the upside is there. I really like that call.
Yeah, plus with Siakam out, they could, especially if Boucher gets out as well, they could go bigger where OG has to play power forward, which is just going to help him with the type of player that he is. Talking about power forward, though, I'll let you start off here. Is there anyone specific that's standing out to you?
I mean, you got the obvious Domantas Sabonis obviously sticks out. 9,800. Still feel like it might be a smidge too cheap. He's got a real smash spot here against the Hornets. They don't play bigs that well, especially power forwards. So I really like that. I could definitely throw out some Justin Jackson Jr. here. I love him too. 5,900 almost seems a little too cheap from how he finished the season and how I saw him playing in the end of the preseason. I feel like that's someone I'm definitely interested in. Julius Randle, I feel like is a little too cheap at 8,800. I feel like he should be at least 1,000 more. So thank you, DK. That's definitely someone I'm pretty interested in too. Then if you kind of go down a little bit, I think Tice is interesting. That would definitely be a tournament play only. And I also think on the other side of Sabonis there, I think PJ Washington or McDaniels, whichever one starts, I think that's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it really well. I don't think there's too much to add. I guess with Zion Williamson out, you could, depending on what is announced, Najee Marshall is 5,300. He would be a relatively solid play. But again, you could add Josh Hart, I guess, into that as well. He's power forward eligible, which is kind of weird since he obviously started as shooting guard in his NBA career. Now he's small forward, power forward on DraftKings. But I feel like those are very solid options. You could take a look at Kyle Kuzma or Davis Bertans with Rui Hachimura, and then Thomas Bryant obviously is out for Washington as well. So along with Gafford, who we'll probably talk about at center, you have Kyle Kuzma and Davis Bertans, who should see a little bit of an uptick there as well. And then, you have some of the guys that we already talked about. I'm interested to kind of see what happens with someone like Obi Toppin. I know he looked significantly better in the preseason. I'm interested if New York's going to give him minutes. If they're not, I think you talked well about Domantas Sabonis and Julius Randle both being underpriced. I completely agree. Sabonis should be over 10K. Randle should be well over 9. So I think you outlined it well. Just added a few guys there. And that's probably more or less where I'm looking. I do think that depending on news, like if we get news that Gillespie's starting for Toronto, anything weird like that, it's going to bump some other guys into play. But that's kind of who I'm looking at along with you at this point for power forward. Center, I feel like there's always a ridiculous amount of center options on basically every big slate. Is there anyone, I guess, that stands out like well above the rest for you?
I'm really high on Towns. I just like that Minnesota side of that game in general. I just think they're all in smash spots. He's 9,700, so I mean, I think that's almost about right. He could probably be a little bit more. Um, other than that, you want to go way down. You got Robert Williams there. I like him at 5,100, especially with Horford out. I feel like this could be a big year for him. Horford's going to be more kind of a coach, I think, with his age and all. So you could interest me in that. I think Wood for Houston. I think that's a really great play too. 8,000 I think is a little cheap. And you were talking about him earlier in that last preseason game. I think I stopped looking at one point, but he had 17 rebounds and 17 points. I don't think he played more than 25 minutes. So really like him as well. You could go to that back to that Portland game too, and Joseph Nurkic. I'm probably butchering that. 7,000. I got no problems with him at all. And then Gobert is someone I might take a shot on. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, so not someone I'm completely sold on. But what about you?
Yeah, I mean, that basically does it. I think you nailed that perfectly. I don't think that I would change that much of anything at the top. Towns is my top option. The one guy I guess that I would add, and strictly GPPs, I'm not sold that you want to use him in cash at this point. Joel Embiid, he's 10-6, priced relatively appropriately. The thing is, Joel Embiid is the type of player that's going to make a statement to Ben Simmons not being on the floor. He's going to go out there and he's probably going to drop a ridiculous game, strictly to prove the point that they don't need Ben Simmons. Him suspended doesn't really matter to him. He kind of he talked to the media and told him that he's not a babysitter. It's just Joel Embiid is that kind of guy. That kind of I think that's what he's going to work with. Especially to start the season. And I don't necessarily see anyone on New Orleans stopping him. When you look at it, Jonas Valanciunas obviously can score a lot. He's not a good defender, though. Hernan Gomez, I'm not really concerned about. Jackson Hayes is way too young. He'll foul Embiid 100 times in this game. There's nothing I'm concerned with for Embiid. Towns is my favorite option. I do think you can use Vucevic as well. And then you kind of outlined it extremely well with the other guys. Christian Wood, 100% fine. Yusuf Nurkic is a great play. PJ Washington, we talked about a power forward, but also there. If Boucher is in the lineup, especially if he's starting, 6,500 is too cheap for his pure upside. Depends on the questionable tag, though, at this point. But if he is starting and getting solid minutes, I 100% want him in some type of tournaments. And then as you obviously drop down lower, you talked about it extremely well. You have Robert Williams at 5,100. I feel like at the price tag, that's actually in play for cash because he scores so well and he can score so fast. And then Daniel Gafford at 49 is a bit too cheap, especially if he's getting bigger minutes. So I have no issues whatsoever with him as well. Some other guy that I don't necessarily want to say considering because I don't think at this point I'm going to play him, but I will be interested to see how he does would be Evan Mobley. I want to see how many minutes Cleveland gives him. Obviously, he was a top pick, and DraftKings, like many rookies, decided to price him at 4,500, which is pretty ridiculous if he sees 30 plus minutes. I'm just not completely sold that he's going to get it. So it kind of puts him in a weirder position at this point. But I think that about wraps up what we're doing. As always, once again, go ahead, give us a thumbs up, comment any questions or comments. I guess that's why it's called that below. And the more engagement we get, subscribe to the channel, turn on noties. That's the little bell if you didn't know. The more engagement we get, the more likely I am to convince them to give out free core plays. So I feel like we're in a win-win situation. DFSkarma.com for all of our DFS stuff that is free, or that's where you can go to buy our subscription. Or you can check out betkarma.com, our sister site, for all of your sports betting needs. Thanks for coming on, Spike. Had a great time. Everyone else, good luck, and we will be back tomorrow with another podcast.
Yeah.